Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. But then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch videos over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and then take advantage whenever you're ready. But before we start, just want to touch base on what we saw yesterday, and that was very painful, but I got to remind you to focus on what matters, which is the consumer behavior, total addressable market, and sales. So we know that Americans want more cannabis, they are spending their money to buy more cannabis, and the total addressable market in the US continues to expand as states will reform their laws. So that is the reality on the ground, though, and that's very important to remember that that is the case, and that the valuations will eventually catch up and that time is on our side. Plus, this bear cycle has to end at some point. Based on all the facts I'm relaying to you week after week, it's not going to last forever. So as much as it sucks while we're in it, and the fact that the Democrats, like the Republicans, have proven that you cannot trust any politicians to keep their word because they work at their own pace, it doesn't change the fact that New Jersey and New York social equity applicants will need access to functional banking, and that Americans want more cannabis. So let's focus on the facts. As cannabis sales in the US hit $1.4 billion over the last 90 days, as you can probably guess, the one with the largest population, as this state is a classic example of how the country's economy would grow once the cannabis industry is legalized nationwide. With a total of $1.4 billion in taxable cannabis sales in the second quarter alone, California takes the lead as the state with the highest amount of sales in the US, obviously. But the cannabis industry makes revenues worth billions of dollars from states that have legalized either or both the use of recreational cannabis and medical cannabis. And sales are somewhat limited because the drug is still prohibited based on federal laws. However, this has not hindered the popularity of the plant among patients and adults in the country. Well, keep in mind, a lot more states have yet to reform their laws than states that have, especially for adult use. So once that happens, obviously we're going to see that total addressable market expand. As more pro-cannabis laws are being approved, the sales in each state are increasing. The U.S. Department of Commerce classifies cannabis stores under a segment called miscellaneous store retailers. At what point is some adult going to have the balls to just create a new category for dispensaries, which they are? The latest figures obtained from the segment show that as of July, cannabis dispensaries single-handedly increased sales by 3.5% from June to July. These dispensaries cannot be referred to as small any longer. All dispensaries across the country are doing more than fine. In the last quarter, total retail sales lagged. However, cannabis retail sales continued to boom. The sale contributed to the economy in immense ways. And at last count, 15 states have legalized recreational cannabis, while 35 states allow medical cannabis programs for licensed patients. Among these states, few have stood out in the way they have swiftly built infrastructures and passed more policies for the growth of their cannabis industry. Some of these states include California, Colorado, Michigan, Washington, Nevada, and Illinois. And as I've shown over time on this channel, when states like Illinois and Arizona legalize for adult use, but then they also launch their adult use program fairly quickly after announcing they're going to legalize, they see a massive boom in volume and sales. So we can obviously expect this from other states when they eventually get things going. New Jersey, New York, be great if you can get that going sooner than later. But nonetheless, we see medical cannabis sales nearing the 400 million mark out of Arkansas as well. So this is progress, even in some smaller red states that are not as cannabis friendly. The state revenue agency projected medical cannabis sales will have crossed the 400 million mark by the end of Labor Day weekend. According to the State Department of Finance Administration, sales through Thursday totaled 398 million on 59,047 pounds sold. Based on those figures, medical cannabis patients have paid about 15 per gram on average. And the Arkansas Department of Health reported 79,042 or 420 active patient cards, less than a 1% increase from the number of circulation at the end of July. So clearly, we're not seeing patient growth in Arkansas like we are in Florida. We're not seeing sales in Arkansas like we are in Florida, because those are two different places. Each is their own, but at the same time, it does show that states that do reform their laws do make money, and that's usually good for taxes and jobs for the citizens in those states. While Missouri sees more than 140 medical cannabis dispensaries open in under a year since reforming their medical cannabis laws in 2018, and its first medical cannabis dispensary opened last October. As of now, there are more than 140 across the state, with more to come. The state's medical cannabis industry employs roughly 5,000 people, yet earlier this summer, Governor Mike Parson vetoed a bill that would have allowed medical cannabis business owners to deduct their expenses. So basically, he blocked something that would allow cannabis cannabis operators to do business just like any other industry in the US, just showing that politicians want to keep the status quo and the double standard alive as long as possible, which just sucks. But the head of the state program says that won't stop the multi-million-dollar industry. And it's true, it won't stop them, it's just going to hinder their ability to operate like any other industry. But the sales revenue is pleasantly surprising. It shouldn't be. You should expect good revenues because people want this. Lyndall Fraker, director of the section of medical cannabis with the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, says at the end of July we surpassed 91 million in sales. So a much smaller market than other ones that we cover, but good to see that cannabis is at least the benefits of cannabis are being highlighted, and people want more of the good stuff that it brings. Well, we've got this update from Cantor Fitzgerald from Jeremy Burke, which I wanted to show. They still predict that New York's recreational cannabis market will open in 2023, despite the pair of appointments last week. So let's see what they have to say. Handicapping the start of the New York rec sales and the eventual rules. Investment summary, last week's good news notwithstanding, we still project the start of rec sales in New York by first half of 2023. Sort of to be expected though. I think what we're really hoping for is New Jersey to launch by November. That would really get the ball rolling. But regardless, last Wednesday, September 1st, New York Governor Kathy Hochul appointed the chairperson of the New York Cannabis Board and the executive director of the Office of Cannabis Management. After 6 months of inaction following the signing of the state's Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act, this was certainly good news. Taking Colorado per cap stats as a proxy, we estimate that New York rec med MJ sales could be as much as $8 billion someday. That said, 4 more members must be appointed to the CCB in addition to the chief equity officer and a 13-member cannabis advisory board. Of course, there's always more. We will monitor the formation of the CCB and its members eventually drafting out the rules for the state's rec MJ program, but for now we continue to assume rec MJ sales start first half of 2023 at the earliest. Further down in this note, we outline several questions that in our view remain in the air, such as A, could there be legal challenges to the proposed hybrid 2-tier system, i.e. new licensees not available to be vertically integrated while medical incumbents are allowed to cultivate wholesale as well as retail in MJ Rec? B, will there be cultivation caps? C, will municipalities be allowed to offer exclusivity deals to operators, like the example of Phillipsburg and Maplewood in New Jersey, allowing only one MSO to operate rec stores in their towns? D, will the state's Department of Health transfer management of the med program to the CCB and thus delay the rollout of medical flower? With the MSOS ETF down 19% over the past 3 months, with the S&P at the same time up 7%, the federal level action on the CAOA, the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, unlikely until mid-2022, we believe state level news will likely be the main catalyst for the group for now. Note, in our view, poor liquidity and lack of banking reform will likely continue to limit institutional investor involvement in MSOs, regardless of custodian bank policies, the latest presumed catalyst du jour. And so that comes from Cantor Fitzgerald. Not as hopeful as we would like, but at the same time, there's still so many moving parts and factors, and that obviously when I started this channel hoping that things would move quickly after the election, hey, lesson learned. Things do not move quickly, especially when you're relying on politics, and the most important thing we can rely on, I think, is state level movements, and so that would come from New Jersey. And if New Jersey does go early, there's reason to believe that SAFE could go early for the social equity applicants and Cory Booker's SAFE. But on top of that, we still have the Trulieve and Harvest merger to close, which is going to draw attention to the space, as that will make Trulieve the largest MSO, bigger than Curaleaf. And then also on top of that, we have continuing strong fundamentals. All of these factors give us reason to believe that these MSOs are very good growth value plays, just trading at really cheap multiples right now. So obviously, a lot of moving parts complicates this, and more importantly, it's good to remember time is on your side when you plan accordingly. And on that note of SAFE, I found this interview with the VP of Global Government Relations, David Culver, for Canopy Growth, and I wanted to share this. It's about 4 minutes. You can watch through it, but this gives some insight into, again, someone working with the governments and what they think we could see in the near future. So just wanted to play it so you can take away from it what you will.
Because I'd like to walk you through what I think is going to play out. That this bill doesn't even have a bill number yet. We haven't even started the process yet. Right. And yet I'm already hearing in the month of August, Republican senators coming out talking about cannabis, which they were not doing 6 months ago, a year ago. This is going to get a lot of attention starting in September. And I think the Democratic leadership, including Senator Schumer, Senator Wyden, Senator Booker, they've all said that they believe very strongly that we need to go after comprehensive reform first to right the wrongs of the past before we deal with these other smaller issues that are in front of us right now, like business deductibility, access to banks, et cetera, et cetera.
And that actually is a great segue into my next question here.
Perfect question.
In the event that we don't get this bill passed, in this congressional session, what's next? Is it safe banking? What's a logical next step for us to work on?
Well, I could be in big trouble at my at the office. That's probably my first comment if we don't get it done.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think that again, there is significant possibilities that comprehensive reform gets done. If it doesn't, then I do think the Democrats are going to pivot to something smaller, and they do realize that this is a rare opportunity that they've got. It was almost like the cannabis industry was dealt a perfect hand politically when Biden won the White House.
Right.
Georgia special elections happened, and the Democrats barely got control of the Senate, but they do have control, and then of course the House held on. So we were dealt a perfect hand. There hasn't really been much action to date outside of the appropriations process and the House passing the banking package earlier this year. But we have this opportunity, and I don't think the Democrats are going to miss it. This is a winner for them no matter what. So comprehensive reform is a winner. It's a winner if they have the Republicans, every one of them vote no. I think they can use that as an issue in the 2022 elections, but I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is to actually work in a bipartisan way. Heard it out of Senator Schumer's mouth repeatedly, and they want this to be done in a bipartisan way, and then it's the Democrats that were able to get this done ultimately. So, I'm very hopeful about it, but I do think there will be a fallback, and you should probably be looking for that fallback position to be something that's similar to the line in the sand that the bulk of the Republican senators are comfortable with. And what that is exactly, I don't know. But is it a combination of banking, business deductibility, and some aspect of social justice like expungement? Potentially. But that's something that we all need to be watching very closely, because that could be at the end of the day where this ends up.
And so that line in the sand, which is a lot more likely, sounds like it could be some form of Safe Plus, which could include more banking protections to allow eventual uplisting, removal of 280E, and long overdue expungements that should have been done a long time ago. But regardless, just keep in mind, CAOA is also his job to get done, and he's backed by a lot of money with Constellation Brands and Canopy in order to try and get this done. And he did mention that cannabis is going to be in the spotlight in September. You're probably thinking, well, it's September 8th. Where's cannabis? It's not in the spotlight. Keep in mind, Congress is on recess until September 13th. So all of what he said, it's likely that we will see that after Congress resumes. It's very possible, so we'll have to look out for that. But just keep in mind, it's worth noting that if we compare the US MSOs to any other industry, and we look at the average revenue growth for 2021 and full year 2022, if we look at tobacco, CPG, alcohol, technology, healthcare, and even Canadian Tier 1 LPs, they do not compare to the growth that US MSOs are seeing. So as an investor who focuses on fundamentals and growth and value at low valuations, this is, again, another beautiful way to visualize this opportunity in front of us. And we've got this one, growth at value multiples, spot check for US cannabis, looking at 2022 and 2023 enterprise value to EBITDA multiples. And so if we take a look here, this is the list. From US, we've got Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, Verano, Trulieve, Cresco Labs, Terra and Air Wellness, which you would consider the tier 1 MSOs. All of these trading at very low enterprise value to EBITDA multiples, looking into 2022 and 2023. And we're already September of 2021, so time does fly when you're having fun. Folks, then on to MSO news. Trulieve announces September 2021 investor conference participation. So basically, we can anticipate Kim Rivers participating and speaking to the investors that run Beacon Securities and their virtual cannabis conference, Needham Virtual Cannabis Conference, and BTI Virtual Inaugural Cannabis Conference. So that sounds like this is the first one they're doing. So you best believe Kim is going to be speaking to them and telling them that Trulieve is the most profitable US MSO, as is, with a much lower valuation than Curaleaf. Therefore, when the Harvest and merger deal closes, there's reason to believe that when Trulieve is the largest MSO by revenue and profitability, these investment firms are going to want to start sending their money into Trulieve as opposed to Curaleaf. Yet, though, at the same time, Curaleaf announces September Investor Community Conference and event participation at the exact same conferences. So you believe Boris Jordan is going to be pleading his case as to why Curaleaf is still going to be the leader. And who's right? We don't know. That's what time will only tell us. But it's very fun and exciting that the two CEOs of the largest US MSOs are going to be speaking with investors who have capital and the ability to help move these share prices up in a positive direction. So that's good to highlight. While Air Wellness signs a definitive agreement to acquire owner of Levia cannabis-infused seltzers, saying that since we first announced our intention to acquire Levia a few weeks ago, we've been thrilled with the feedback we've received from customers, friends, investors, and industry colleagues about how much they've enjoyed the cannabis experience Levia brings. So, Air intends to purchase 100% of the equity interest in Cultivauna LLC. The terms of the transaction include $20 million in upfront consideration, made up of up to $10 million in cash, with the remainder in stock. An earnout payment of up to an additional $40 million will be paid in shares based on the achievement of revenue targets in 2022-2023. While Levia Cannabis Infused Seltzer is currently available in Massachusetts in 3 experiences and flavors: Achieve, Raspberry Lime, Celebrate, Lemon Lime, and Dream Jamberry. Each flavor is available in 12-ounce slim cans and contains 5 milligrams of THC. Levia is also available in water-soluble tinctures in the same formulations. While Chicago-based Cresco Labs takes over Cultivate, they've officially closed this acquisition cannabis dispensary with 3 stores in central Massachusetts. So Cultivate Holdings, owner of the Leicester Cannabis Dispensary, was one of the first of its kind to open in Massachusetts, has been bought by Cresco Labs of Chicago. The deal, which had been in the works for months, closed Friday, according to the buyer. Besides Leicester, there are Cultivate operations in Worcester and Framingham. So they get 3 total dispensaries. The closing today constitutes another important step for Cresco Labs as we deepen our presence in large, attractive states like Massachusetts, which also just happened to reach the $2 billion mark in sales since legalizing in 2018. Charlie Bachtel, Cresco Labs CEO and co-founder, said in the Facebook post. And in the spring, when the pending deal was made public, the sale price was $158 million. In November 2018, the opening of the Leicester dispensaries was followed by long lines and headlines. The store was one of the 2 dispensaries, the other in Northampton, that opened on the first day of allowed adult use sales in Massachusetts. So this does give me hope as a Cresco Lab shareholder that they're investing in dispensaries that have been around since the beginning, which means they're running efficiently and they are good operations as opposed to trying to buy up any new recently opened ones that have not been in operation for a long time. Well, lastly, we've got this news from Marijuana Moment. Cannabis legalization doesn't lead to increased youth use, which is very positive as more data allows us to counter the prohibitionist argument that have lasted for so long. Youth cannabis does not increase after states enact legalization for medical or recreational use, researchers concluded in a study published in a prominent scientific journal on Tuesday. The policy change instead has an overall impact on adolescent cannabis consumption that is statistically indistinguishable from zero, they found. In fact, it seems that establishing certain regulated cannabis models actually leads to lower cannabis use among adolescents under certain measures, a finding that directly conflicts with anti-legalization arguments that are commonly made by prohibitionists. The analysis, published by the Journal of the American Medical Association, analyzed federal youth risk behavior survey data from 1993 to 2019 in 10 medical or adult use states. It builds upon existing studies on the impact of cannabis reform on youth consumption that have reached similar conclusions. Researchers determined that the adoption of recreational cannabis legalization was not associated with current medical use or frequent cannabis use. Further, medical cannabis law adoption was associated with a 6% decrease in the odds of current cannabis use and a 7% decrease in the odds of frequent cannabis use. The study, which received partial funding through the Federal National Institute of Health grant, also found that youth cannabis consumption decreased in states where recreational legalization has been in place for 2 years or more, and that's a big deal. So consistent with the estimates from prior studies, there was little evidence that recreational legalization or medical legalization encourages youth cannabis use, the researchers said, and as more post-legalization data becomes available, researchers will be able to draw firmer conclusions about the relationship between recreational legalization and adolescent cannabis use. But the main thing is once we can deschedule cannabis, we can accelerate and kickstart this research. Hopefully that day does come sooner than later. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it, as this will help keep your head cool during these tough times. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns, and please try to poke holes in the thesis with reason or logic if you can. I'm always up for a good debate. But if you enjoyed this, please leave a like on it. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.